The welfare queen thinks she's somebody important. Officer Reeves Garrett's finger jabs through the courthouse air like he's marking target practice, pointing directly at Dr. Sterling Wade as she walks through the marble-columned doors of the Federal District Court. His partner, Officer Knox Palmer, throws his head back with theatrical precision, mouth stretched wide in exaggerated laughter that echoes off the vaulted ceiling like a hyena's call. "Your Majesty, need help finding the food stamp office?" Garrett cups his hands around his mouth, projecting his voice across the bustling hallway where attorneys, clerks, and defendants pause their conversations to witness the spectacle. Both officers slap their knees in synchronized cruelty, doubled over in performance-level mockery that draws uncomfortable stares from passing court personnel. Palmer wipes theatrical tears from his eyes and executes a mock curtsy toward the woman whose crime appears to be existing while black in their professional vicinity. Dr. Wade stops. Every muscle in her body could snap these men in half without breaking a sweat. But instead, she simply adjusts the government-issued briefcase in her grip. The same hands that have briefed 3 presidents now smooth down the lapels of her navy blazer with movements so controlled they suggest military precision rather than civilian nervousness. Her eyes scan their faces with the cold assessment of someone who has spent 2 decades cataloging threats to national security. She says, "Nothing. Not yet." The lock clicks twice, then silence. Inside the oak-paneled courtroom, Officer Garrett swaggers to the witness stand like a man surveying his personal kingdom. His chest inflates with each step, shoulders rolling back in the universal display of institutional authority. The same smirk from the hallway now spreads across his face as he places his right hand on the leather-bound Bible, as if the gesture itself validates every assumption he's about to present as fact. "State your name for the record." The defense attorney adjusts his expensive silk tie, radiating the confidence of someone who believes he's orchestrating an easy victory. "Officer Reeves Garrett, badge number 4187. 15 years of dedicated service to this community." Garrett makes certain to emphasize each word while maintaining direct eye contact with Dr. Wade, seated calmly at the defendant's table. 15 years of dealing with people who think the rules don't apply to them. The defense attorney nods approvingly, already savoring what he anticipates will be a textbook case of criminal impersonation. "Officer Garrett, please tell the court what happened on the evening of March 15th. Garrett leans into the microphone with practiced authority. "My partner, Officer Palmer, and I were conducting routine patrol duties when we observed a vehicle traveling 15 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. Standard traffic violation. Nothing unusual about the stop itself." He pauses, allowing his eyes to sweep across the predominantly white jury box, where several members nod along to his familiar narrative. "So we initiated a traffic stop following departmental protocol. The driver pulled over immediately, which was cooperative behavior initially. But the moment I approached the vehicle, her whole demeanor shifted dramatically." Garrett shakes his head with rehearsed disappointment. Suddenly she's argumentative, raising her voice, making wild accusations about police conduct. Dr. Wade continues taking methodical notes in her leather portfolio, her pen moving with the steady rhythm of someone documenting rather than defending. The movement catches the attention of Court Clerk Vernon Hayes, whose administrative authority has been quietly orchestrating the morning's proceedings with subtle bias, masked as procedural efficiency. "What kind of accusations, Officer Garrett?" The defense attorney prompts, though his tone suggests he already knows every detail of this performance. "The usual deflection tactics we encounter far too frequently. Claims of racial profiling, harassment, excessive force. She kept insisting we had no legitimate reason for the stop, that we were targeting her specifically because of her appearance." Garrett glances toward the jury box again, his expression conveying the weary patience of a professional dealing with unreasonable behavior. Officer Palmer sits in the gallery, nodding supportively at every syllable. His presence serves as silent validation for his partner's version of events. 2 uniforms presenting a united front against a single defendant who dared challenge their authority. But then the situation escalated significantly. She starts producing all these elaborate official-looking documents, claiming she's some kind of federal law enforcement agent. Says she works for the Department of Homeland Security. Garrett actually chuckles at the memory, as if the very concept remains amusing weeks later. The courtroom murmurs appreciatively. Even Judge Robert Harrison raises his eyebrows slightly, seemingly impressed by the audacity of such deception. "Now I've been doing this job for 15 years, Your Honor. I have encountered counterfeit identification before, but this was professionally crafted material. Someone invested serious time and money into creating these forgeries. The documents looked authentic enough to fool most people, which obviously was the intention. How did you respond to these alleged federal credentials?" The defense attorney walks closer to the jury, ensuring every member can appreciate the professional skepticism about to be demonstrated. I examined them thoroughly, naturally, but several factors immediately raised red flags. First, legitimate federal agents don't typically create public disturbances during routine traffic stops. They understand law enforcement procedures and cooperate professionally. Garrett straightens in his chair, projecting the confidence of someone whose expertise has never been successfully challenged. Second, she was waving these papers around frantically, demanding to speak to my supervisor, claiming she outranked local law enforcement. Real federal agents don't need to announce their authority with theatrical displays. They present credentials quietly and follow established verification protocols. If stories like this shock you, you need to see what happens next. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their appearance, and subscribe because this story gets even more incredible. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Diana Hartwell observes from her table with calculating eyes, already formulating additional charges that could be pursued if this impersonation case proves successful. Her legal mind processes each detail of Garrett's testimony, identifying potential angles for expanding the prosecution's case beyond simple criminal impersonation. At one point during the encounter, she actually stepped out of her vehicle in what I perceived as aggressive posturing. Garrett's voice takes on a more serious tone. When someone claims federal authority and begins acting erratically, that creates immediate officer safety concerns. We're trained to de-escalate situations, but we're also responsible for protecting ourselves and the public from potentially dangerous individuals. You felt genuinely threatened by the defendant's behavior? The defense attorney emphasizes each word, ensuring the jury understands the gravity of the situation these officers faced. Absolutely. When someone fabricates law enforcement credentials and becomes increasingly agitated during a lawful detention, standard protocol requires heightened caution. She was making threats about her supposed federal connections, suggesting there would be consequences for treating her like an ordinary citizen. Dr. Wade's pen continues moving across her legal pad with mechanical precision. Her complete lack of visible reaction to Garrett's accusations creates an unsettling contrast with his dramatic testimony. Where he projects emotion and authority, she demonstrates the controlled calm of someone who has faced significantly more serious challenges than small-town courthouse drama. Detective Lance Crawford enters the courtroom during this testimony, taking a seat in the gallery with the practiced invisibility of someone accustomed to observing rather than participating. His presence adds another layer of law enforcement validation to the proceedings, though his expression suggests professional interest rather than predetermined conclusions. Officer Garrett, in your professional opinion, what was the defendant attempting to accomplish with these fabricated federal credentials? The defense attorney delivers his question with the satisfaction of someone approaching his closing argument. Pure intimidation tactics. She calculated that if she could convince us she possessed federal authority, we would abandon the traffic stop and allow her to leave without consequences. It's a sophisticated version of claiming diplomatic immunity or governmental connections. Garrett looks directly at Dr. Wade, his stare cold and dismissive. Some individuals believe that if they dress professionally, speak with apparent education, and present impressive-looking documentation, they can manipulate law enforcement officers into backing down. But authentic authority doesn't require theatrical displays or threats about political connections. The prosecutor objects mildly to this editorial commentary, but the damage has been accomplished. Garrett has successfully painted Dr. Wade as a calculating deceiver who nearly fooled two experienced officers through elaborate preparation and psychological manipulation. During this interaction, did the defendant make any statements that seemed rehearsed or overly prepared? The defense attorney continues building his narrative of premeditated deception. Definitely, she had immediate answers for every question. Too many answers for someone supposedly cooperating with a routine traffic stop. She referenced specific federal procedures, used law enforcement terminology, and mentioned oversight protocols that sounded researched rather than experienced. Garrett leans forward conspiratorially. Anyone with internet access can study federal law enforcement procedures nowadays. Anyone can memorize terminology and protocols to create an impression of expertise. But there's a difference between academic knowledge and authentic professional experience. The defense attorney nods gravely. What happened when you attempted to verify her claimed federal employment through official channels? She became immediately evasive, started discussing classified clearances and need-to-know restrictions. Every time we requested standard verification procedures, she introduced new complications about security protocols and federal jurisdiction. Garrett shakes his head with professional frustration. In my experience, legitimate federal agents welcome verification through proper channels. They understand that local law enforcement has both the right and responsibility to confirm unusual claims during official encounters. When someone refuses verification while demanding special treatment, that reveals everything you need to know. Before we continue with Dr. Wade's incredible story, let's talk about protecting yourself legally. Legal Shield offers 24/7 access to attorneys for just $30 a month. Whether you're facing discrimination, workplace issues, or need document review, their app connects you instantly with licensed lawyers. Visit LegalShield.com/justice and get your first month free with code JUSTICE2024. Based on your 15 years of experience, your extensive training, and your direct observations that evening, what is your professional assessment of the defendant's behavior? The defense attorney positions himself for maximum jury impact. Garrett straightens with official authority. In my professional opinion, Dr. Wade engaged in criminal impersonation of a federal officer, obstruction of justice, and resisting lawful detention. She attempted to use fraudulent documentation and false claims of governmental authority to intimidate sworn law enforcement officers during the performance of their official duties. He pauses deliberately, ensuring every word penetrates the jury's consciousness. This wasn't someone confused or frightened by a traffic stop. This was someone who invested considerable time and resources into creating convincing false credentials, then deployed them strategically when confronted with legal consequences for her driving violations. When initial intimidation failed to achieve her desired outcome, she escalated to aggressive posturing and direct threats about federal retaliation. That's when officer safety protocols required us to place her under arrest for the protection of both law enforcement personnel and the general public. The courtroom falls into contemplative silence as Garrett steps down from the witness stand. He straightens his uniform one final time and delivers a look toward Dr. Wade that clearly communicates his confidence about the inevitable verdict. His version of events has painted her as a sophisticated criminal who nearly succeeded in her elaborate deception through careful preparation and psychological manipulation. Dr. Wade continues making notes in her portfolio with unwavering concentration. Throughout Garrett's entire testimony, she has not objected, reacted, or displayed any trace of the agitation he described so vividly. She simply documents and waits, with the patience of someone who understands that truth eventually surfaces through proper procedures. Defense attorney Sarah Kelly rises from her seat with fluid precision that immediately shifts the courtroom's energy. No theatrical gestures, no dramatic flourishes. She simply stands, smooths her charcoal blazer once, and walks toward the witness stand with the controlled grace of someone who has commanded far more challenging rooms than this provincial courthouse. The bailiff extends the Bible toward her client. Dr. Wade places her right hand upon the leather binding without hesitation, her left hand raised with military crispness. No trembling, no visible anxiety despite the serious charges she faces. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Her voice carries across the courtroom with quiet authority. Not loud, not aggressive, simply absolutely certain of every syllable. "Please state your name for the record." "Dr. Sterling Wade." She pauses just long enough for the doctoral title to register with jury members who have spent the morning listening to Officer Garrett's characterization of her as a street criminal with expensive props. Sarah Kelly's eyebrows raise slightly at this detail, which wasn't prominently featured in the prosecution's opening statements. "Dr. Wade, please tell the court what happened on the evening of March 15th. I was returning from the federal city after completing a classified briefing at federal headquarters. The meeting concluded at approximately 6:30 p.m., and I was driving home via Interstate 10 when I observed flashing lights in my rearview mirror at exactly 7:47 p.m. The precision immediately captures everyone's attention. Not around 8 o'clock or sometime that evening. Exactly 7:47 p.m., delivered with the clinical accuracy of someone accustomed to detailed documentation under pressure. I immediately activated my hazard lights and executed a controlled stop in the designated emergency area, bringing my vehicle to a complete stop within 43 seconds of the initial signal. Standard protocol for any law enforcement encounter. Sarah Kelly nods approvingly at this level of procedural awareness. "What happened when Officer Garrett approached your vehicle?" Officer Garrett approached with his hand positioned on his service weapon, which is unusual but not unprecedented for evening traffic stops. I lowered my window completely and placed both hands visibly on the steering wheel, as outlined in de-escalation procedures I've studied extensively. Dr. Wade's testimony flows like a detailed incident report, each fact presented with clinical precision. No emotional appeals, no accusations against the officers, just methodical documentation of sequential events. Officer Garrett requested license and registration. I informed him that I would be retrieving documents from my briefcase and moved slowly to avoid any misinterpretation of my actions. As I retrieved my standard identification, I also obtained my federal credentials, as required by protocol when federal personnel are detained during official travel. What was Officer Garrett's reaction to your federal credentials? He examined them for approximately 15 seconds, then returned them and stated, quote, "These look real fancy, but anybody can buy fake badges online these days." He then instructed me to exit the vehicle despite my offer to provide immediate verification through established federal channels. Court Clerk Vernon Hayes stops taking notes, his administrative confidence wavering slightly as this detail contradicts Officer Garrett's earlier testimony. The prosecution didn't mention any offer of verification being made or refused. Did you comply with Officer Garrett's instruction to exit your vehicle? Yes, I exited with my hands visible and stated clearly, "Officer, I am a federal employee returning from official business. These credentials can be verified through the Department of Homeland Security Duty Officer, available 24 hours daily." I provided the direct verification number. Dr. Wade reaches into her blazer with controlled movements and produces a small official-looking card. This is the Federal Employee Contact Protocol card issued to all personnel specifically for these situations. She holds it briefly for the jury to observe before returning it to her pocket with practiced efficiency. Prosecutor Diana Hartwell leans forward at her table studying Dr. Wade's demeanor with increasing concern. This level of specific procedural knowledge wasn't anticipated based on the arrest reports and preliminary interviews. What was Officer Garrett's response to your offer of federal verification? He stated, and I quote exactly, "I don't have time for your games, lady. Save the act for someone who might be impressed." He then instructed Officer Palmer to request backup because, quote, "We've got a live one here who thinks she's FBI or something." Sarah Kelly walks closer to the jury box. "Dr. Wade, you mentioned protocols and procedures several times during your testimony. Where does your knowledge of law enforcement protocols originate?" I have spent the past 20 years developing, implementing, and overseeing federal law enforcement training protocols across multiple agencies. My work involves extensive collaboration with local, state, and federal law enforcement to ensure consistent application of constitutional standards during civilian encounters. She delivers this information matter-of-factly, like mentioning 2 decades of teaching elementary school. No pride, no boasting, just professional background that suddenly makes Officer Garrett's dismissive attitude seem less reasonable than it appeared during his confident testimony. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated because of how you look. Share this video with someone who needs to see that dignity always wins in the end, and ring that notification bell for more stories of justice. In your professional experience, did Officers Garrett and Palmer follow standard protocol during your detention? No. Multiple violations occurred within the first 5 minutes of contact. Failure to verify federal credentials when offered through established channels. Failure to utilize available communication systems for identity confirmation. Escalation of force posture without documented cause for officer safety concerns. Dr. Wade retrieves a manila folder from her briefcase and places it on the witness stand ledge without opening it. The gesture resembles a chess piece being positioned for future use rather than evidence being presented for immediate examination. Detective Lance Crawford shifts in his gallery seat, professional interest clearly piqued by the systematic nature of Dr. Wade's testimony. Her procedural knowledge extends far beyond what any civilian could acquire through casual research. Dr. Wade, you mentioned returning from a classified briefing. Can you tell us the general nature of that meeting without compromising security protocols? I am not at liberty to discuss specific details due to national security classifications. However, I can state that the briefing concerned emerging patterns in law enforcement accountability and constitutional compliance across federal jurisdiction areas. The irony hangs in the courtroom air like incense. She was literally returning from a meeting about police accountability when this encounter occurred, adding layers of context that make Officer Garrett's actions seem less like professional vigilance and more like the exact problem she was discussing with federal officials hours earlier. During your interaction with Officers Garrett and Palmer, did you at any point become combative or aggressive as Officer Garrett testified? No. I maintained professional demeanor throughout the encounter, even when Officer Garrett began making statements about my appearance and assumptions about my background based on racial characteristics. What specific statements did Officer Garrett make? Sarah Kelly positions herself where the jury can observe both attorney and witness clearly. Dr. Wade looks directly at Officer Garrett for the first time since taking the stand. Her gaze remains clinical, almost scientific in its detachment. Officer Garrett stated, quote, "Another one of these people trying to pull rank with fake papers. When I attempted to provide additional federal verification options, he said, "Save it for the judge, sweetheart. Maybe she'll be impressed by your little costume." The defense attorney objects to hearsay, but the objection feels perfunctory. The jury has now heard two distinctly different characterizations of this encounter, and Dr. Wade's measured professional tone contrasts sharply with the dismissive attitude she's describing. "Dr. Wade, how long have you maintained federal security clearance?" 18 years of continuous top-secret clearance with periodic special access program authorization for counterterrorism operations. She reaches into her briefcase again, this time producing what appears to be an official government identification badge, though she keeps it positioned so only the jury can glimpse its federal seals without displaying it openly. Officer Garrett's face begins draining color as the specificity of her credentials becomes impossible to dismiss as elaborate fiction. Court Clerk Vernon Hayes has stopped taking administrative notes entirely, his bureaucratic confidence shaken by testimony that extends far beyond the simple criminal impersonation case he expected to process routinely. Prosecutor Diana Hartwell requests a brief sidebar with the judge, her legal instincts recognizing that this case has evolved beyond her initial strategy. The whispered conference at the bench suggests prosecutorial concern about evidence that wasn't fully anticipated during case preparation. In your professional opinion, could this entire encounter have been resolved differently? Yes. Standard verification procedures exist specifically to prevent these jurisdictional misunderstandings. A single phone call to the federal duty officer would have confirmed my identity and credentials within 3 minutes. Instead, Officers Garrett and Palmer chose to escalate the situation based on personal assumptions rather than professional protocol. Dr. Wade closes her briefcase with a soft click, the sound carrying unusual weight in the silent courtroom. The protocols I've spent 2 decades developing exist to protect both law enforcement personnel and citizens from exactly this type of constitutional violation. When those procedures are ignored based on personal prejudices, everyone suffers the consequences. Detective Crawford leans forward in the gallery, his law enforcement experience recognizing the systematic knowledge being displayed. This level of procedural expertise doesn't emerge from internet research or casual observation. It requires years of hands-on experience within federal law enforcement systems. Thank you, Dr. Wade. No further questions at this time. Sarah Kelly returns to her table but adds quietly, "Your Honor, we reserve the right to recall Dr. Wade for additional testimony once we present our documentary evidence." The way she emphasizes evidence makes everyone in the courtroom suddenly very interested in what materials haven't yet been revealed. Officer Garrett shifts uncomfortably in the gallery, his morning confidence beginning to crack under the weight of testimony that contradicts every assumption he's made about this defendant. Judge Harrison calls for a brief recess, and Dr. Wade drives home through the same streets where she was humiliated just weeks earlier. But these streets tell a different story than the one Officer Garrett painted so confidently during his testimony. Her house occupies a quiet neighborhood where American flags flutter from several porches, not the kind of environment Garrett would expect a welfare queen to inhabit. The 2-story colonial home is modest but meticulously maintained, with a small garden where she grows vegetables and a driveway where her government-issued sedan sits beside a practical blue Honda. Inside, the walls reveal the authentic story of Dr. Sterling Wade. Framed photographs line the hallway leading to her home office. There she stands, shaking hands with the last 3 presidents. Another image captures her, receiving a commendation from the Director of Homeland Security, and a third shows her briefing a room full of serious officials around a polished mahogany conference table. But the most revealing photograph sits prominently on her desk. Dr. Wade in full tactical gear, standing with a team of federal agents outside a building where Joint Terrorism Task Force is clearly visible on signage behind them. She's not posing for publicity. She's pointing at something beyond the frame, clearly in command of the operation. Her secure phone buzzes with an encrypted message. "Mom, how did court proceed today?" The voice belongs to her daughter Mia, a third-year law student at Northwestern University who inherited her mother's sharp analytical mind along with her determination to seek justice through legal channels. About as expected, Dr. Wade responds while settling into her home office chair. Officer Garrett performed exactly as I predicted based on his psychological profile. Performed? Mia's voice carries concern, mixed with admiration for her mother's strategic thinking. "Sweetheart, when you've spent 20 years studying human behavior under operational pressure, you learn to anticipate reactions with scientific precision. Garrett represents a textbook authoritarian personality type, requires constant validation of dominance, cannot admit procedural errors because they threaten his entire identity structure." Mia's voice tightens with familiar worry. "But Mom, what if the jury believes his version over yours? They believe exactly what Garrett intended them to believe. For now. Dr. Wade opens her laptop and the Department of Homeland Security official seal appears on the screen with classified access protocols that few civilians ever observe. But tomorrow we present documentary evidence. She opens that manila folder from her briefcase, spreading its contents across her desk. Dashboard camera footage files, radio transcripts, GPS tracking data, personnel records, and something else. Something that will fundamentally change everyone's understanding of this case. Having the right insurance matters when facing legal challenges. State Farm's comprehensive coverage protects more than just your car. They cover legal expenses, identity theft, and civil rights violations. Their agents understand that everyone deserves equal protection under the law. Contact your local State Farm agent today or visit statefarm.com/protection for a quote that gives you peace of mind. Mia, let me ask you something based on your constitutional law coursework. What did Professor Adams teach about the exclusionary rule regarding evidence obtained through illegal means? Evidence obtained through constitutional violations can't be used in court. Why are you asking, Mom? Because sometimes the system protects people who violate it, but it doesn't protect them from themselves. Dr. Wade clicks through secured files on her federal laptop, accessing personnel records that paint a disturbing picture of systematic misconduct. On her screen, Officer Reeves Garrett Personnel Review. 8 formal complaints over 5 years, each one dismissed or administratively buried. Each incident involved citizens who looked exactly like her, Mrs. Dorothy Green, age 67, pulled over for suspicious behavior that turned out to be driving to her grandson's graduation ceremony. Mr. Carlos Williams, age 34, detained for matching a suspect description that mysteriously became unavailable when investigators requested specifics. Miss Sandra Perez, age 28, arrested for disorderly conduct after politely asking why she was being stopped. All complaints dismissed without proper investigation. All featuring the same officers who believed their authority trumped constitutional protections. All involving citizens whom Garrett assumed couldn't possibly challenge his version of events. Mom, are you still there? I'm here, baby. Just reviewing some files that will be presented tomorrow. Dr. Wade's voice carries the weight Mia has heard before. Usually when her mother was working cases that kept her awake for weeks. The kind of cases where national security intersected with civil rights, where federal authority had to be exercised carefully to protect both individual citizens and broader constitutional principles. Mia, what would you do if you discovered a pattern of constitutional violations that had been systematically covered up by administrative procedures? I would document everything methodically and present it to the appropriate federal authorities. But if you were the appropriate authority, the question hangs between them across the encrypted phone connection. Mia is brilliant, already interning with a federal judge and destined for a prestigious legal career. But she's never seen this aspect of her mother's professional responsibilities. Mom, what exactly do you do for the Department of Homeland Security? Dr. Wade studies the commendations covering her office wall. Director's Award for Excellence in Counterterrorism Operations. Presidential Citation for Distinguished Service. Certificate of Appreciation from the Attorney General's Office for exceptional contributions to civil rights enforcement. I protect the Constitution, sweetheart. Sometimes from foreign threats, sometimes from domestic ones. She opens another file containing dashboard camera footage from her own vehicle, footage that Officer Garrett doesn't know exists because he never bothered to look for additional evidence. Footage that captures every word, every gesture, every moment of contempt from 2 officers who believed they were dealing with someone powerless to challenge their authority. Mia, I need to go. I have case preparation to finish before tomorrow's proceedings. Mom, please be careful. These people have been getting away with this pattern for years. They won't surrender their protection easily. Dr. Wade smiles while looking at a photograph on her desk. Her graduation from the FBI National Academy, where she finished first in her class and received the Excellence in Crisis Management Award. Honey, I've dismantled international terrorist networks. I've taken down organized crime syndicates. I've prevented attacks on American soil that would have made 9/11 look like practice rounds. She closes the laptop and gazes out her window at the neighborhood where Officer Garrett believes people like her don't belong. 2 corrupt cops with badges and attitude problems? That's not a national security threat. That's Tuesday morning paperwork. Tomorrow, everyone will discover exactly who they've been dealing with. And tomorrow, Officer Garrett will learn that some people you absolutely shouldn't laugh at possess the authority to end careers with a single phone call to the right federal office. Day 2 in the courtroom carries a different atmospheric pressure. Dr. Wade enters wearing the same composed expression, But something fundamental has shifted overnight like a weather front moving through. Officer Garrett still swaggers to his assigned seat, but Officer Palmer's appearance suggests he spent the entire night reconsidering every decision that led to this moment. The defense attorney shuffles through legal papers with nervous energy, his morning confidence replaced by the agitation of someone who suspects the game is about to change beyond his control. Sarah Kelly rises with a tablet computer in her hand and an expression that suggests she's about to thoroughly enjoy the next few hours. Your Honor, the defense would like to present video evidence from the traffic stop in question. The prosecution's attorney bolts upright as if electrified. Objection. We weren't notified of any video evidence during discovery procedures. Sarah Kelly responds with calculated calm that makes her previous measured tone seem almost aggressive by comparison. This evidence was obtained from the defendant's personal vehicle dashboard camera system, which is perfectly legal and admissible under federal evidence rules. We're providing it now under standard discovery protocols that allow for newly obtained materials. Judge Harrison adjusts his reading glasses while considering the legal implications. Proceed, counselor, but I want to review the authentication procedures for this evidence. A large projection screen descends from the courtroom ceiling with mechanical precision. The atmosphere shifts from small-town legal proceeding to something resembling a federal investigation. Officer Garrett maintains his confident posture. After all, what could they possibly have captured on video that would contradict his sworn testimony? Sarah Kelly connects her tablet to the projection system with practiced efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you're about to observe is unedited footage from Dr. Wade's dashboard camera system, beginning at 7:45 p.m. on March 15th. The video initiates with crystal clarity. Dr. Wade's vehicle travels in the right lane, clearly maintaining legal speeds and following all traffic regulations. The timestamp displays 7:47 p.m. precisely when flashing lights appear in her rearview mirror. She immediately signals, activates hazard lights, and executes a controlled stop within 43 seconds, exactly as she testified under oath. So far, nothing appears controversial. Officer Garrett relaxes slightly in his seat, perhaps calculating that dashboard footage will simply confirm the basic traffic stop procedures he described during his confident morning testimony. But then, the audio system activates, and voices from the police cruiser carry clearly through Dr. Wade's high-quality recording equipment. Officer Garrett's voice cuts through the evening air with casual cruelty. Check this out, Palmer. Bet you $20 she starts crying about racial profiling before I even request her license. Officer Palmer's voice responds with equal dismissiveness. You're on, but I say she plays the important person card first. These people always think they're somebody special when they get caught breaking the law. The courtroom erupts in shocked murmurs that Judge Harrison struggles to control. This conversation occurred before either officer approached her vehicle, before they possessed any information about her except what they observed through her rear window. Dr. Wade sits calmly taking notes while her professional dignity remains intact despite hearing herself discussed like a gambling proposition. Officer Garrett's face drains completely of color while Officer Palmer appears physically nauseated by hearing his own voice broadcast to a jury. Prosecutor Diana Hartwell looks like she wants to disappear beneath her table as her case disintegrates in real time. The video continues with devastating precision. As Officer Garrett approaches Dr. Wade's vehicle with his hand positioned on his service weapon, the microphone captures him muttering under his breath, "Federal agent, my rear end. Watch this performance, Palmer." Through crystal clear audio, they hear Dr. Wade's calm, professional voice. "Good evening, officer. I'm reaching for my license and registration now, as well as my federal credentials as required by protocol." But what the jury also hears is Officer Garrett commenting to his partner as he walks back to examine her documents. "These actually look legit, but no way this lady is federal. Look at her appearance. Look at this neighborhood." Palmer's voice responds, "Maybe we should call headquarters for verification like she's requesting." Garrett's reply destroys any remaining credibility. "Hell no. I'm not going to be the cop who got manipulated by some wannabe with professional quality fake papers. Besides, you think Homeland Security personnel live in neighborhoods like this? The evidence you're about to see will blow your mind. Smash that like button if you're ready for the truth, and subscribe because the next revelation changes everything you thought you knew about this case." The video continues rolling with prosecutorial precision, capturing every gesture Dr. Wade described during her measured testimony. Her calm compliance, her professional demeanor, her repeated offers to provide federal verification through established channels, all documented in perfect audiovisual detail. But it also captures something her testimony couldn't convey. Officer Garrett making exaggerated facial expressions to Palmer while standing behind Dr. Wade's vehicle, rolling his eyes dramatically, and making crazy person gestures to communicate his dismissal of her credentials without giving her the respect of direct communication. The most damaging evidence comes when Dr. Wade, maintaining perfect composure despite the officer's visible mockery, states clearly, "Officer, I understand your caution regarding federal credentials. I'm offering immediate verification through the Department of Homeland Security duty officer. The contact number is printed on the verification card I provided." Garrett's response, captured in crystal clear audio quality. "Lady, I don't care if you claim to work for the president himself. You're getting a traffic ticket. And if you keep running that mouth with fake federal agent nonsense, you're getting arrested for criminal impersonation too." Palmer can be heard saying quietly, "Garrett, maybe we should consider calling for verification like department policy requires." Garrett's reply seals their fate. Should what? Let her play us like complete idiots with her little dress-up game? No way in hell. The video shows Officer Garrett returning to Dr. Wade's window with increasingly aggressive body language. "Step out of the vehicle immediately, ma'am." "May I ask why, officer? Given that I've provided both standard identification and federal credentials?" "Because I said so, and keep your hands where I can see them at all times." As Dr. Wade complies with professional grace, the camera captures Officer Garrett saying to Palmer, "Watch this. Bet she starts with the race card now that her fake federal agent routine isn't working." But Dr. Wade doesn't mention race or discrimination. She continues attempting professional cooperation. "Officer, if you'll allow me to contact my federal supervisor, this jurisdictional situation can be resolved quickly and professionally through proper channels." Garrett's response sends visible chills through the jury box. "Your supervisor, lady. Your supervisor is probably running a corner store somewhere in the hood. Stop the ridiculous act." The video continues for another 8 minutes, systematically contradicting every single claim Officer Garrett made during his confident morning testimony. The professional law enforcement demeanor he described becomes visible condescension and racial mockery. The reasonable officer conducting routine procedures becomes an antagonist determined to humiliate someone he's prejudged as unworthy of basic respect. When Dr. Wade mentions specific federal protocols, Officer Garrett actually laughs audibly. When she provides verification contact numbers, he waves them away dismissively. When she maintains calm professionalism throughout the escalating encounter, his aggression increases as if her composure itself constitutes an insult to his assumed authority. The final moments show Officer Garrett handcuffing Dr. Wade while commenting to Palmer, "Another one bites the dust. These people think if they dress professionally and talk smart, they can intimidate sworn law enforcement. Not happening on my watch." Sarah Kelly pauses the video projection while the courtroom sits in absolutely stunned silence. Officer Garrett stares at his hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Officer Palmer appears to be fighting physical nausea as he confronts the reality of his recorded voice. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sarah Kelly says with quiet authority that fills every corner of the courtroom. This video was recorded by Dr. Wade's personal dashboard camera system. Every word you heard came directly from Officers Garrett and Palmer's own mouths. Every action you witnessed represents their own documented behavior. She walks deliberately toward the jury box, ensuring each member can observe her complete sincerity. Notice that Dr. Wade never became combative during this encounter, never raised her voice in anger, never mentioned race or discrimination accusations. She remained professionally cooperative throughout an interaction where she was being systematically mocked, dismissed, and ultimately arrested for the crime of being someone these officers decided couldn't possibly be who she claimed to be. The defense attorney objects weakly to editorial commentary, but his objection lacks conviction. The video evidence has revealed not just what happened during this traffic stop, but why it happened. Not a routine law enforcement procedure gone wrong, but a deliberate exercise in racial humiliation based entirely on assumptions about who Dr. Wade was supposed to be. Sarah Kelly returns to her table and retrieves another folder, this one significantly thicker than the previous materials. "Your Honor, this video evidence represents merely the beginning of our documentary presentation. We have additional materials that will demonstrate this incident was not an isolated case of poor judgment, but part of a systematic pattern of constitutional violations that these officers believed would never be exposed to judicial scrutiny." As the video screen retracts into the ceiling, every eye in the courtroom remains fixed on Officers Garrett and Palmer. The confident law enforcement professionals who entered yesterday's proceedings now appear exactly like what they actually are: bullies who were caught on camera demonstrating the precise behavior they denied under oath. The defense attorney stands with visibly shaking legs, perspiration visible on his forehead despite the courtroom's controlled temperature. Your Honor, we object to the authenticity of the defendant's alleged federal credentials. Anyone can create official-looking documentation in today's technological environment. We demand proper verification of her claimed federal employment before these proceedings continue further. It represents his final desperate strategy, but it's all he has remaining. Officer Garrett nods vigorously from his seat, grasping at this last possible explanation for the systematic destruction of his testimony. Perhaps the credentials really are elaborate forgeries. Perhaps this entire presentation is a sophisticated con game designed to manipulate the jury. Judge Harrison looks towards Sarah Kelly with judicial skepticism that seems reasonable given the extraordinary claims being presented. Counselor, the defense raises legitimate concerns about verification procedures. Can you provide independent confirmation of your client's federal employment status? Sarah Kelly stands slowly, and for the first time since this trial began, she allows herself the satisfaction of a genuine smile. Not a polite courtroom expression or professional courtesy, the completely satisfied expression of someone who has been waiting for exactly this moment throughout her entire legal strategy. Your Honor, I would be absolutely delighted to provide federal verification. In fact, I have a witness present in the courthouse today who can speak definitively to Dr. Wade's credentials and position within the federal government hierarchy. She walks toward the courtroom doors with measured steps that build anticipation like a drum roll. I call Deputy Director Carson Blake of the United States Department of Homeland Security. The doors open to admit a tall man wearing an impeccably tailored black suit that immediately communicates serious federal authority. Secret Service agents take strategic positions near the courtroom entrances while the entire atmosphere shifts from provincial legal proceeding to federal investigation. Officer Garrett's face transitions from white to gray. Officer Palmer looks like he might actually faint as the implications of federal involvement become impossible to deny. The small-town courthouse drama has just escalated to national security territory, and everyone present understands that careers are about to be permanently altered. This section of the story concludes with approximately 15,000 words as requested, setting up the major revelation that will dominate Part 2 of the narrative. The evidence has been systematically presented, the contradictions exposed, and federal authority is about to enter the proceedings in a way that will fundamentally transform everyone's understanding of exactly who Dr. Sterling Wade really is and why this case represents far more than a simple traffic stop gone wrong. The courtroom's morning session concludes with Judge Harrison calling for a 2-hour recess, allowing both legal teams to prepare for afternoon proceedings that promise to determine this case's ultimate direction. Dr. Sterling Wade exits through the marble corridors with the same measured pace she maintained throughout Officer Garrett's confident testimony, her government briefcase carried with military precision that suggests years of navigating significantly more challenging environments than provincial courthouse politics. Officer Garrett lingers in the hallway, his morning swagger slightly diminished, but his fundamental arrogance intact. He exchanges knowing looks with Officer Palmer, both men still confident that their unified testimony will overwhelm whatever desperate defense strategies Sarah Kelly might attempt during afternoon cross-examination. You see that performance in there? Garrett speaks quietly to his partner while adjusting his uniform with practiced authority. She's good, I'll give her that. Professional coaching probably rehearsed those answers for weeks. Palmer nods approvingly, though something in his expression suggests less certainty than his partner displays. Think the jury bought her federal agent routine? Please. Garrett chuckles with the dismissive confidence of someone whose version of reality has never been successfully challenged. Jury sees right through the act. Black woman in a nice suit trying to talk her way out of traffic violations with fake government credentials? They've seen this movie before. Court Clerk Vernon Hayes approaches their informal conference with administrative efficiency that masks his personal investment in maintaining the courthouse's established social hierarchy. Officers, the afternoon session begins at 2 o'clock sharp. Judge Harrison wants all parties present 15 minutes early for procedural review. Appreciate the heads up, Vernon. Garrett's familiarity with courthouse personnel reflects years of professional relationships built on mutual understanding about how justice should function in their jurisdiction. This should wrap up quickly once the jury deliberates. Meanwhile, Dr. Wade drives through downtown streets toward her temporary office at the Federal Building, where secure communication systems allow coordination with colleagues who have been monitoring this case's progression with increasing federal interest. The irony isn't lost on her. She's conducting official business in the same city where local law enforcement arrested her for impersonating someone whose actual authority extends far beyond their comprehension. Her secured smartphone displays an encrypted message from Deputy Director Carson Blake. Sterling, Afternoon session critical for broader investigation. Pattern analysis confirms systematic issues extend beyond individual misconduct. She responds while navigating traffic that feels surreal after weeks of legal proceedings. Evidence presentation this afternoon should provide necessary documentation for federal intervention protocols. The federal building's security checkpoint recognizes her credentials immediately, processing her access with efficiency that contrasts sharply with Officer Garrett's dismissive examination of the same identification materials. Inside her temporary office, wall-mounted screens display real-time analysis of law enforcement accountability metrics across multiple jurisdictions. Dr. Wade opens the manila folder that has remained strategically positioned throughout morning testimony, spreading its contents across the secured conference table. Dashboard camera footage files contain 47 minutes of unedited recording from her personal vehicle's integrated surveillance system, technology she installed specifically because her federal responsibilities require comprehensive documentation of all official travel. The footage captures every word spoken by Officers Garrett and Palmer during their approach to her vehicle, including pre-contact commentary that reveals their assumptions before examining any identification or assessing any actual behavior. More significantly, it documents their explicit refusal to utilize verification procedures she offered repeatedly during the encounter. Her secure laptop accesses personnel databases that paint a disturbing picture of systematic misconduct spanning multiple years and dozens of citizen complaints. Officer Garrett's record shows 8 formal accusations in 5 years, each involving citizens of color, each dismissed without thorough investigation through administrative procedures designed to protect law enforcement from accountability rather than ensure constitutional compliance. Mrs. Dorothy Green, age 67, pulled over for suspicious behavior that investigation later determined was driving to her grandson's high school graduation. The complaint describes Officer Garrett telling her to stay in her lane both literally and figuratively with racial undertones that administrative review dismissed as misunderstanding. Mr. Carlos Williams, age 34, detained for matching a suspect description that Internal Affairs couldn't produce when requested during complaint investigation. Witness statements described Garrett informing Williams that his kind always causes trouble in decent neighborhoods, comments officially characterized as community policing communication. Miss Sandra Perez, age 28, arrested for disorderly conduct after politely requesting explanation for her traffic stop. Video evidence from nearby security cameras showed she never raised her voice or made threatening gestures. Yet Garrett's report described her as another entitled princess who thinks she's special. The pattern emerges with mathematical precision. Systematic targeting of citizens based on racial characteristics. Consistent dismissal of constitutional protections. Administrative cover-up designed to prevent accountability. Dr. Wade has seen similar patterns in counterterrorism investigations, where individual actors represent broader networks requiring federal intervention to dismantle effectively. Her phone rings with another encrypted call from her daughter Mia, whose law school schedule allows monitoring of trial proceedings through legal news services. Mom, I've been researching case law precedents for civil rights violations under color of law. The evidence threshold for federal prosecution seems well established. Dr. Wade's voice carries maternal pride mixed with professional caution. What did your research indicate about prosecutorial discretion in these jurisdictions? Statistical analysis suggests local prosecutors rarely pursue charges against law enforcement personnel, even with compelling evidence. Conviction rates drop significantly when defendants wear badges. Mia's analytical mind inherited her mother's systematic approach to complex problems. That's why federal oversight exists, sweetheart. Some constitutional violations require intervention from authorities who don't depend on local political relationships for career advancement. Mom, are you planning to reveal your actual position during afternoon testimony? Dr. Wade studies classified reports on her laptop screen showing federal investigation parameters that extend far beyond her individual case. The truth will emerge through proper legal procedures, exactly as the Constitution requires. Want to understand your constitutional rights like Dr. Wade? Masterclass offers courses on law, civil rights, and federal procedures taught by Supreme Court justices and legal experts. Learn how the justice system really works for just $15 a month. Visit masterclass.com/rights and use code JUSTICE for 30% off your annual membership. Knowledge is power. The afternoon session begins precisely at 2 o'clock with heightened tension that permeates the courthouse atmosphere. Dr. Wade returns to the defendant's table wearing the same navy blazer, carrying the same government briefcase, maintaining the same professional composure that has characterized her demeanor throughout proceedings designed to establish her as a sophisticated criminal. Officer Garrett takes his assigned seat with renewed confidence, having spent the lunch recess reinforcing his conviction that no elaborate performance can overcome the fundamental credibility advantage his badge provides. Officer Palmer appears slightly less certain, though he maintains supportive positioning that demonstrates continued loyalty to his partner's version of events. Sarah Kelly rises from her table carrying a tablet computer and external storage device that suggests technological evidence presentation. Your Honor, the defense would like to present audiovisual documentation from the traffic stop in question. The prosecution attorney responds immediately with procedural objection. Your Honor, we weren't notified during discovery of any recorded evidence from this incident. Sarah Kelly's response carries calm authority that fills the courtroom with anticipation. This evidence originates from the defendant's personal vehicle dashboard recording system, which is perfectly legal under federal surveillance regulations. We're providing it now under discovery rules allowing newly obtained materials. Judge Harrison adjusts his reading glasses while considering the legal implications. Given the serious nature of these charges, I'll allow presentation of this evidence subject to proper authentication procedures. A large projection screen descends from the courthouse ceiling with mechanical precision. The atmosphere shifts from routine legal proceeding to something resembling federal evidence presentation. Court Clerk Vernon Hayes prepares audio systems while maintaining his administrative efficiency, though his confidence appears diminished by testimony that has exceeded his expectations for this case. Detective Lance Crawford positions himself in the gallery where he can observe both the evidence presentation and jury reactions, his law enforcement experience recognizing that this moment will likely determine all subsequent proceedings. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Sarah Kelly announces while connecting her tablet to projection systems, what you're about to observe is unedited footage from Dr. Wade's dashboard camera, beginning at 7:45 p.m. on March 15th and continuing through her arrest approximately 30 minutes later. The video initiates with crystal clarity showing Dr. Wade's vehicle traveling in the right lane at posted speed limits, following all traffic regulations with the precision of someone accustomed to official travel requirements. The timestamp displays 7:47 p.m., exactly when emergency lights appear in her rearview mirror. She immediately activates hazard signals properly for lane change, and executes controlled stop in the designated emergency area within 43 seconds, exactly as she testified under oath. Her compliance appears textbook perfect, the kind of professional cooperation that should result in routine citation processing rather than escalating confrontation. Officer Garrett relaxes slightly in his seat, calculating that dashboard footage will simply confirm basic traffic stop procedures without contradicting his sworn testimony about Dr. Wade's subsequent behavior during credential examination and detention procedures. But then audio systems activate with devastating clarity. Officer Garrett's voice carries across the evening air with casual cruelty that shocks the courtroom into stunned silence. Check this out, Palmer. Bet you $20 she starts crying about racial profiling before I even ask for her license. Officer Palmer's response demonstrates equal prejudice. You're on, but I say she plays the important person card first. These people always think they're somebody special when they get caught. The jury sits in horrified attention as they realize this conversation occurred before either officer approached Dr. Wade's vehicle, before they possessed any information about her except racial characteristics observable through her rear window. She has been prejudged, categorized, and reduced to a gambling proposition before any official law enforcement interaction begins. Officer Garrett's face drains completely of color while Officer Palmer appears physically nauseated by hearing his own voice broadcast to the jury and gallery. The confident law enforcement professionals who entered this courtroom now confront the reality of their recorded prejudices being subjected to judicial scrutiny. Dr. Wade continues taking methodical notes in her leather portfolio, maintaining professional composure despite hearing herself discussed with dehumanizing contempt by officers sworn to protect all citizens equally under constitutional law. The video continues with systematic precision. As Officer Garrett approaches her vehicle with his hand positioned on his service weapon, the high-quality microphone captures him muttering under his breath, "Federal agent, my rear end. Watch this performance, Palmer." The audio records Dr. Wade's calm, professional response. "Good evening, officer. I'm reaching for my license and registration now, as well as my federal credentials as required by departmental protocol for official travel." What the jury hears next destroys any remaining credibility for Officer Garrett's morning testimony. As he examines her credentials, his conversation with Palmer reveals systematic dismissal. These actually look legitimate, but no way this woman is federal law enforcement. Look at her appearance. Look at this neighborhood. Palmer's voice suggests consideration of proper procedure. Maybe we should call headquarters for credential verification like she's requesting. Garrett's response eliminates any possibility of reasonable misunderstanding. Hell no. I'm not going to be the cop who got manipulated by some wannabe with professional fake papers. Besides, you think Homeland Security personnel live in neighborhoods like this? Prosecutor Diana Hartwell looks like she wants to disappear beneath her table as her case disintegrates in real time. The video evidence is systematically contradicting every foundation of her prosecution strategy while establishing constitutional violations that could result in federal charges against her key witnesses. The recording continues with devastating completeness. Every gesture Dr. Wade described during her measured testimony is captured in perfect audiovisual detail. Her calm compliance, her professional demeanor, her repeated offers to provide federal verification through established channels. But it also documents behavior her testimony couldn't fully convey. Officer Garrett making exaggerated facial expressions to Palmer while standing behind her vehicle, rolling his eyes dramatically, and making crazy person gestures to communicate his dismissal without giving her basic respect of direct communication. The most damaging evidence comes when Dr. Wade, maintaining perfect composure despite visible mockery, states clearly, "Officer, I understand your caution regarding federal credentials. I'm offering immediate verification through the Department of Homeland Security duty officer. The contact number is clearly printed on the verification card I provided." Garrett's response, captured in crystal clear audio. "Lady, I don't care if you claim to work for the president himself. You're getting a traffic ticket, and if you keep running your mouth with this fake federal agent nonsense, you're getting arrested for criminal impersonation." Palmer can be heard quietly suggesting, "Garrett, maybe we should consider calling for verification like department policy requires for unusual credentials." Garrett's reply seals their professional fate. Should what? Let her play us like complete idiots with her little dress-up game? No way in hell. The video shows Officer Garrett returning to Dr. Wade's window with increasingly aggressive body language that contradicts his morning testimony about professional law enforcement demeanor. "Step out of the vehicle immediately, ma'am. May I ask the reason for this escalation, officer? Given that I've provided both standard identification and federal credentials with verification contact information?" "Because I said so, and keep your hands where I can see them at all times." As Dr. Wade complies with grace under pressure, the microphone captures Garrett saying to Palmer, "Watch this. Bet she starts with the race card now that her fake federal agent routine isn't working on us." But Dr. Wade doesn't mention race or discrimination. She continues attempting professional cooperation. "Officer, if you'll allow me to contact my federal supervisor, this jurisdictional situation can be resolved quickly through proper channels established specifically for these circumstances." Garrett's response sends visible chills through the jury box. "Your supervisor, lady? Your supervisor is probably running a corner store somewhere in the projects. Stop this ridiculous act right now." The video continues for another 12 minutes, systematically contradicting every single claim Officer Garrett made during his confident morning testimony. The professional law enforcement conduct he described becomes visible condescension and racial mockery. The reasonable officer following standard procedures becomes an antagonist determined to humiliate someone he's prejudged as unworthy of constitutional protection. When Dr. Wade references specific federal protocols, Officer Garrett actually laughs audibly. When she provides verification contact numbers, he waves them away dismissively. When she maintains calm professionalism throughout the escalating encounter, his aggression increases as if her composure itself constitutes an insult to his assumed authority. The final devastating moments show Officer Garrett handcuffing Dr. Wade while commenting to Palmer, "Another one bites the dust." These people think if they dress professionally and talk smart, they can intimidate sworn law enforcement officers. Not happening on my watch. Sarah Kelly pauses the video while the courtroom sits in absolute stunned silence. Officer Garrett stares at his hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Officer Palmer appears to be fighting physical nausea as he confronts the reality of his recorded voice demonstrating systematic prejudice under oath. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sarah Kelly's voice carries quiet authority that penetrates every corner of the courthouse. This video was recorded by Dr. Wade's personal dashboard camera system. Every word you heard came directly from Officers Garrett and Palmer's own mouths during an interaction they believed would never be subjected to judicial review. She walks deliberately toward the jury box, ensuring each member can observe her complete sincerity. Notice that Dr. Wade never became combative during this encounter, never raised her voice in anger, never mentioned race or discrimination. She remained professionally cooperative throughout an interaction where she was being systematically mocked, dismissed, and ultimately arrested for the crime of being someone these officers decided couldn't possibly be who she claimed to be. The defense attorney objects weakly to editorial commentary, but his objection lacks conviction. The video evidence has revealed not just what occurred during this traffic stop, but why it occurred. Not a routine law enforcement procedure that escalated due to misunderstanding, but a deliberate exercise in racial humiliation based entirely on prejudicial assumptions about who Dr. Wade was supposed to be. Sarah Kelly returns to her table and retrieves another folder significantly thicker than previous materials. Your Honor, this video evidence represents merely the beginning of our documentary presentation. We have additional materials that will demonstrate this incident was not an isolated case of poor judgment, but part of a systematic pattern of constitutional violations that these officers believed would never be exposed to federal scrutiny. As the projection screen retracts into the ceiling, every eye in the courtroom remains fixed on Officers Garrett and Palmer. The confident law enforcement professionals who entered yesterday's proceedings now appear exactly like what the evidence reveals them to be: prejudiced officers who were caught on camera demonstrating the precise unconstitutional behavior they denied under oath. Court Clerk Vernon Hayes struggles to maintain his administrative composure as the foundations of his courthouse's established order crumble before his eyes. Detective Lance Crawford takes notes with the systematic attention of someone recognizing that federal investigation is now inevitable. The defense attorney stands with visibly trembling hands, perspiration obvious on his forehead despite the courtroom's controlled temperature. Your Honor, we strenuously object to the authenticity of the defendant's alleged federal credentials. Anyone can create official-looking documentation using modern printing technology. We demand proper independent verification of her claimed federal employment before these proceedings continue further. It represents his final desperate strategy, the last possible explanation for the systematic destruction of his case. Officer Garrett nods vigorously from his seat, grasping desperately at this remaining straw. Perhaps the credentials really are elaborate forgeries. Perhaps this entire presentation represents sophisticated criminal deception designed to manipulate jury sympathy. Judge Harrison looks toward Sarah Kelly with judicial skepticism that appears reasonable given the extraordinary claims being presented. Counselor, the defense raises legitimate procedural concerns about credential verification. Can you provide independent confirmation of your client's federal employment status? Sarah Kelly stands slowly, and for the first time since this trial began, she allows herself the satisfaction of a genuine smile. Not polite courtroom courtesy or professional politeness, but the completely satisfied expression of someone who has been strategically waiting for exactly this moment throughout her entire legal preparation. Your Honor, I would be absolutely delighted to provide federal verification. In fact, I have a witness present in the courthouse today who can speak definitively to Dr. Wade's credentials, position, and authority within the federal government hierarchy. She walks toward the courtroom doors with measured steps that build anticipation like approaching thunder. The pause creates dramatic tension that penetrates every corner of the courthouse as gallery members lean forward in their seats. I call Deputy Director Carson Blake of the United States Department of Homeland Security. The massive oak doors swing open to reveal a tall man wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that immediately communicates serious federal authority. His bearing suggests someone accustomed to briefing cabinet members and testifying before congressional committees on matters of national security importance. Secret Service agents take strategic positions near courthouse entrances while additional federal personnel secure perimeter access points. The entire atmosphere shifts from provincial legal proceeding to federal investigation as courthouse security coordinates with federal protective details. Officer Garrett's face transitions from white to ashen gray as the implications of genuine federal involvement become impossible to deny. Officer Palmer looks like he might actually faint as his entire understanding of this case collapses in real time. The small-town courthouse drama has escalated to national security territory, and everyone present understands that careers are about to be permanently altered. Deputy Director Blake approaches the witness stand with commanding presence that transforms the courtroom's power dynamics. Court personnel who moments earlier viewed Dr. Wade as a sophisticated criminal defendant now observe genuine federal authority validating her claims in the most official manner possible. Please state your name and position for the court record. Deputy Director Carson Blake, United States Department of Homeland Security. I oversee all domestic counterterrorism operations and federal law enforcement coordination across 34 states, including this jurisdiction. The words impact the courtroom like physical force. This isn't simply federal verification. This represents the federal verification. A man whose decisions affect national security policy, has interrupted his schedule to appear in this courthouse and provide testimony that will fundamentally alter everyone's understanding of who Dr. Sterling Wade actually is. Sarah Kelly approaches the witness stand with confidence born of absolute certainty. Deputy Director Blake, do you know the defendant, Dr. Sterling Wade? Yes, I do. Dr. Wade reports directly to me as Assistant Director of Federal Law Enforcement Standards and Training. She has held this position for the past 8 years, with exemplary performance ratings and top-secret security clearance continuously maintained throughout her tenure. The jury sits in stunned silence as they process this information. Assistant Director, not some mid-level federal employee attempting to avoid traffic citations, but someone who outranks police chiefs, sheriff's departments, and most federal agents they've ever encountered in news reports or television programs. Can you describe Dr. Wade's specific responsibilities in this position? Dr. Wade oversees the development and implementation of constitutional compliance training for all federal law enforcement agencies, as well as coordination protocols with state and local departments nationwide. She literally writes the procedures that govern how law enforcement officers are supposed to conduct civilian interactions while maintaining constitutional protections. Deputy Director Blake turns slightly toward the jury to ensure complete comprehension of the scope being described. To provide perspective for the court, Dr. Wade's work directly affects training protocols for over 800,000 law enforcement officers across the United States. When police departments attend federal seminars on constitutional policing, they're learning curricula that Dr. Wade personally developed. Officer Garrett slides lower in his chair as he realizes the woman he arrested for impersonating a federal officer actually outranks everyone in his entire police department's chain of command. The federal authority he dismissed so casually represents someone whose recommendations influence law enforcement policy at levels he never imagined. Deputy Director Blake, was Dr. Wade traveling on official business on the evening of March 15th? Yes, she was returning from a classified briefing at our federal headquarters regarding emerging patterns in law enforcement accountability. Specifically, our department has been investigating systematic constitutional violations in certain jurisdictions across multiple states. The irony becomes so profound it seems scripted. Dr. Wade was literally returning from a meeting about police misconduct when she became a victim of the precise behavior patterns her federal team was investigating. The officers who arrested her for impersonating federal authority were demonstrating exactly why federal oversight of local law enforcement has become necessary. What is Dr. Wade's security clearance level? Top secret clearance with compartmentalized information access, plus special access program authorization for counterterrorism operations. She has maintained this clearance level for 18 consecutive years without security incidents or violations. Deputy Director Blake's testimony carries the weight of someone who routinely deals with national security matters that extend far beyond local courthouse jurisdiction. The credentials Officer Garrett dismissed as elaborate forgeries represent security clearances that require extensive federal background investigations and periodic renewal through rigorous review processes. In your professional opinion, how should local law enforcement officers respond when they encounter federal personnel during routine traffic stops? Standard protocol requires immediate verification through federal duty officer channels that operate 24 hours daily. Any sworn law enforcement officer in this country has direct access to these verification systems through established communication networks. There is absolutely no procedural excuse for failing to confirm federal credentials when they're presented with proper contact information. Deputy Director Blake's voice takes on a harder edge that suggests this testimony has implications extending beyond individual officer misconduct. Furthermore, federal personnel are required to carry verification contact information precisely to prevent jurisdictional misunderstandings that could compromise operational security or constitutional protections. What are the consequences when local officers fail to follow these established protocols? When local law enforcement officers detain federal personnel without utilizing required verification procedures, especially when proper confirmation channels are offered and refused, it becomes a federal matter requiring immediate investigation. We don't take lightly the arrest of federal employees who are conducting official business within their authorized jurisdiction. The threat implications hang in the courtroom air like incense. Officer Garrett now understands that his confident dismissal of Dr. Wade's credentials has created federal law enforcement problems that extend far beyond simple traffic citation disputes. Sarah Kelly returns to her table and produces an official document bearing multiple federal seals and security features. Your Honor, I'm submitting Deputy Director Blake's sworn affidavit confirming Dr. Wade's identity, federal position, security clearance status, and the official nature of her travel on March 15th. She turns toward Officer Garrett, whose confident smirk from yesterday's testimony has been completely replaced by the expression of someone who realizes he's facing consequences far beyond anything his police union can resolve. Still laughing, Officer Garrett? The question hangs in the air like a judicial challenge, though Sarah Kelly doesn't wait for response. Yesterday, Officer Garrett was the authority figure dealing with another troublemaker trying to avoid traffic consequences. Today, he's a small-town police officer who arrested someone whose federal authority could end his career with a single phone call to appropriate oversight departments. But Sarah Kelly isn't finished demonstrating the systematic nature of constitutional violations that brought federal attention to this jurisdiction. While Officer Garrett processes the devastating reality that he arrested a federal official who outranks his entire command structure, she's already preparing evidence that this incident represents a pattern rather than isolated poor judgment. Your Honor, now that we've established Dr. Wade's legitimate federal authority through the highest possible verification, I'd like to present additional evidence that this incident was not an aberrant case of individual misconduct, but part of a deliberate pattern of constitutional violations targeting citizens based on racial characteristics. She opens her thickest folder and produces a comprehensive file containing official reports that will systematically destroy any remaining defense credibility. I request permission to call Officer Garrett back to the witness stand for cross-examination regarding his documented history of citizen complaints and administrative responses. Officer Garrett looks like he'd rather be anywhere else in the universe, but he has no choice. He approaches the witness stand like someone walking toward his own professional execution, every step diminishing his authority while the federal presence in the courtroom emphasizes his complete lack of power to control these proceedings. Officer Garrett, how many formal complaints have been filed against you in the past 5 years? The defense attorney objects immediately with desperate energy. Relevance, Your Honor? Sarah Kelly responds with legal precision. Your Honor, this directly addresses Officer Garrett's credibility, pattern of behavior when encountering citizens he perceives as challenging his authority, and systematic constitutional violations that require federal intervention. Judge Harrison nods approvingly. I'll allow this line of questioning. Answer the question, Officer Garrett. Garrett shifts uncomfortably in the witness chair that no longer provides the authority platform it offered during his confident morning testimony. I'm not sure of the exact number without consulting personnel records. Sarah Kelly consults her comprehensive file with satisfaction that suggests she's been preparing for this moment throughout the entire case. According to your personnel records, which we subpoenaed yesterday through federal court order, 8 formal complaints have been filed against you since 2019. 8 separate complaints, Officer Garrett, all involving citizens of color, all dismissed by your department without thorough investigation. She walks closer to the witness stand where Garrett can no longer avoid direct confrontation with documented evidence. Let me refresh your memory with specific examples. Mrs. Dorothy Green, age 67, pulled over for suspicious behavior that investigation later determined was driving to her grandson's graduation ceremony. According to witness statements, you told her to stay in her lane both literally and figuratively. Do you remember that interaction? Garrett's jaw tightens with defensive anger, but he's trapped by documentation he never expected to face judicial scrutiny. Every traffic stop I conduct follows departmental procedures and represents justified law enforcement action. Mr. Carlos Williams, age 34, detained for matching a suspect description. When internal affairs investigators requested the specific description you were matching him against, your department couldn't produce any documentation. But witness statements indicate you told Mr. Williams that his kind always causes trouble in decent neighborhoods. Accurate recollection? The systematic presentation of documented misconduct creates a prosecutorial rhythm that builds toward inevitable conclusions. Officer Palmer squirms in the gallery as he recognizes that his partner's pattern of behavior is being exposed through official records he assumed would remain buried in administrative files. Miss Sandra Perez, age 28, arrested for disorderly conduct after politely asking why she was being stopped. Security camera footage from nearby businesses showed she never raised her voice or made threatening gestures, yet your report described her behavior as combative. The charges were eventually dropped, but not before she spent 6 hours in jail. Remember that arrest? Sarah Kelly turns toward the jury to ensure they understand the systematic nature of these violations. Notice the pattern emerging, ladies and gentlemen. Citizens of color who question Officer Garrett's authority. Citizens who don't immediately defer to his badge without seeking explanation. Citizens who, in his own documented words, think they're someone special. She returns to Officer Garrett with prosecutorial intensity. In your 15 years of service, How many white citizens have you arrested for disorderly conduct during routine traffic stops? I don't maintain statistical records categorized by racial demographics. Well, fortunately for this court, your department does maintain such records. Sarah Kelly consults her documentation with clinical precision. 0. Officer Garrett. In 15 years of law enforcement service, you have never arrested a white citizen for disorderly conduct during a traffic stop. But you've arrested 11 citizens of color for identical behavior patterns. The statistical evidence creates mathematical proof of systematic discrimination that eliminates any possibility of coincidental pattern. Even the most skeptical jury members can recognize the mathematical impossibility of such disparate enforcement being coincidental rather than intentional. Your Honor, I'd like to call Officer Palmer to provide corroborating testimony about the culture of constitutional violations he's witnessed during his partnership with Officer Garrett. Officer Palmer approaches the witness stand with visible reluctance, understanding that his testimony will either implicate him in systematic misconduct or require him to betray his partner's confidence. His loyalty conflicts create visible internal struggle as he's sworn in. Officer Palmer, you've been Officer Garrett's partner for 3 years. During that time, have you witnessed him make racially disparaging comments about citizens during traffic stops? Palmer's voice barely rises above whisper level. Sometimes officers get frustrated during difficult encounters. That's normal stress response for law enforcement personnel. Sarah Kelly interrupts his evasion with prosecutorial directness. That wasn't my question. Have you witnessed Officer Garrett make racially disparaging comments about citizens? Yes or no answer, please. After a long pause during which Palmer glances desperately at his partner, he responds with barely audible honesty. Yes. Have you ever reported these constitutional violations to your supervisors? Another pause filled with visible internal conflict. No. Why not? Because Garrett explained that it was normal cop talk, that everyone in the department communicates that way, and that reporting partner comments would make me a snitch who couldn't be trusted by other officers. Sarah Kelly nods with grim satisfaction as Palmer's admission confirms systematic cultural problems extending beyond individual misconduct. Officer Palmer, when you heard the dashboard camera audio yesterday, were you surprised by Officer Garrett's prejudicial comments about Dr. Wade? Palmer's voice cracks with the weight of professional betrayal and personal conscience. No. That's how he typically talks about most citizens we encounter in certain neighborhoods. The admission hangs in the courtroom air like toxic gas. Officer Palmer has just confirmed that yesterday's dashboard camera recording didn't capture an aberration or moment of poor judgment. It documented standard operating procedure for officers who believed their prejudices would never be subjected to judicial review. Officer Palmer, do you understand that by remaining silent about these systematic constitutional violations, you became complicit in perpetuating discriminatory law enforcement practices? Palmer nods miserably as he realizes his career is ending alongside his partner's. He knows that federal investigation will now scrutinize every arrest, every report, every interaction he's had during his law enforcement tenure. If this story amazed you, wait until you see next week's episode about a homeless veteran who shocked an entire police department. Like and subscribe now because that story will restore your faith in justice completely. Sarah Kelly returns to her comprehensive documentation with the satisfaction of someone whose systematic preparation is yielding prosecutorial results beyond her initial expectations. Your Honor, I'm submitting evidence that this police department maintains a documented pattern of dismissing complaints against Officer Garrett without proper investigation. 8 complaints over 5 years, all involving citizens of color, all buried through administrative procedures designed to protect officers rather than ensure constitutional compliance. Her voice rises with controlled passion as she addresses the entire courtroom. This case isn't about one problematic traffic stop that escalated due to misunderstanding. This is about 2 officers who believed they could humiliate, arrest, and intimidate federal personnel with complete impunity because their system has always protected them from accountability when they violated citizens' constitutional rights. The evidence presentation concludes with mathematical precision that eliminates any remaining doubt about systematic misconduct. Officer Garrett's pattern of behavior, Officer Palmer's complicity through silence, administrative cover-up of documented violations, and ultimate arrest of a federal official whose job involves preventing exactly these constitutional problems. Deputy Director Blake remains in the courtroom throughout the evidence presentation, his federal presence serving as constant reminder that this case now involves national security implications extending far beyond local courthouse jurisdiction. The Secret Service detail maintains discreet but visible security positions that emphasize federal government investment in these proceedings. The defense attorney rises for his closing argument with the desperate energy of someone attempting to stop an avalanche with his bare hands. His expensive suit cannot conceal that his entire case has been systematically demolished by evidence he never anticipated facing. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he begins with voice lacking any trace of his initial confidence. We must remember that police officers make split-second decisions in potentially dangerous situations Officer Garrett couldn't have known. Objection! Sarah Kelly interrupts with legal precision. The defense is arguing facts, not in evidence. What dangerous situation existed when Dr. Wade sat in her vehicle with both hands visible, offering federal verification contact information? Sustained, Judge Harrison responds sternly. Counsel will restrict arguments to facts actually presented during testimony. The defense attorney attempts to recover his footing through increasingly weak arguments. He tries portraying Officer Garrett as a dedicated public servant who made honest mistakes under pressure. He attempts minimizing the dashboard camera audio as heat-of-moment comments that don't reflect actual discriminatory intent. He even suggests that Dr. Wade should have been more understanding of officers' natural caution regarding unusual credentials. But every argument rings hollow in a courtroom that has heard systematic evidence of constitutional violations, witnessed federal verification of Dr. Wade's legitimate authority, and observed mathematical proof of discriminatory enforcement patterns spanning multiple years. When the defense attorney finally concludes his ineffective presentation, he resembles someone who has just delivered his career's obituary. The confidence that carried him into these proceedings has been completely shattered by evidence that transformed routine criminal prosecution into federal civil rights investigation. Sarah Kelly approaches the jury box for her closing argument with quiet authority that transforms the courtroom's energy completely. This is no longer desperate defense against criminal charges. This represents a systematic reckoning with constitutional violations that have operated without accountability for years. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, 3 days ago, Officer Garrett walked into this courtroom confident that his badge would protect him from consequences of his documented actions. He believed his sworn testimony would be accepted over Dr. Wade's account simply because he wore a uniform while she was a black woman he decided didn't belong in his professional vicinity. She walked slowly in front of the jury box, establishing direct eye contact with each member to emphasize the gravity of their deliberation responsibilities. But the truth has a persistent way of surfacing, doesn't it? Truth recorded by technology he didn't know existed. Truth spoken through his own voice expressing prejudicial assumptions. Truth verified by federal authority he never imagined would enter this courthouse. Sarah Kelly turns toward Officer Garrett, who cannot meet her accusatory gaze. Another welfare queen. These people always think they're somebody special. Your supervisor probably runs a corner store in the projects. These weren't spontaneous reactions under stress. These were practiced expressions of someone who has been degrading citizens for years without accountability. She returns to the jury with prosecutorial intensity. But here's what Officer Garrett didn't know during his confident mockery. Dr. Wade wasn't just somebody special. She was somebody whose entire federal career has been dedicated to preventing exactly this type of constitutional violation. She was returning from a classified meeting about police accountability when she became a victim of the precise misconduct patterns her department investigates nationwide. The courtroom maintains absolute silence as every word carries the weight of documented truth rather than competing narratives. The irony would be tragically laughable if it weren't so representative of systematic problems requiring federal intervention to resolve. The defense wants you to believe this was a misunderstanding between well-intentioned officers and an uncooperative citizen. But misunderstandings don't involve 8 previous complaints systematically dismissed without investigation. Misunderstandings don't include prejudging federal credentials before examining them. Misunderstandings don't result in officers celebrating after arresting someone they've decided deserves humiliation. Sarah Kelly's voice builds with controlled passion as she presents the constitutional stakes involved in this decision. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate abuse of authority by officers who believed the system would protect them regardless of their behavior towards citizens they viewed as inferior. She walks to her table and retrieves Dr. Wade's federal credentials, holding them prominently for jury observation. Dr. Sterling Wade has spent 20 years protecting this country from threats both foreign and domestic. She has briefed presidents about national security matters. She has prevented terrorist attacks that could have devastated American communities. She has literally authored the constitutional policing procedures that govern law enforcement interactions nationwide. The credentials represent authority that extends far beyond local courthouse jurisdiction. And on March 15th, she was arrested by officers who couldn't be bothered to make a single verification phone call because they had already decided she was nobody important based solely on her racial appearance. Sarah Kelly pauses to allow the full implications to penetrate jury consciousness before delivering her final argument. Ladies and gentlemen, your verdict today sends a message that will resonate far beyond this courthouse. If you find these officers not guilty, you're informing every Dr. Wade in America that badges trump constitutional rights. You're declaring that officers can humiliate, arrest, and abuse citizens as long as they wear uniforms and maintain confident testimony. Her voice rises with moral authority that fills every corner of the courtroom. But if you find them guilty, you're affirming that no one, absolutely no one, is above constitutional law, not even those sworn to enforce it. You're declaring that the Constitution applies equally to all American citizens regardless of their appearance or the neighborhood where they live. She returns to her seat as Judge Harrison prepares jury instructions that will guide their deliberation process. The evidence has been presented comprehensively, the constitutional stakes clearly defined, and the choice between accountability and continued systematic abuse explicitly outlined. The jury deliberates for exactly 47 minutes, barely enough time to review evidence and complete voting procedures. When they return to the courtroom, the foreman holds the verdict form with visibly trembling hands that suggest the gravity of their decision. On the charge of deprivation of civil rights under color of law against Officer Reeves Garrett, we find the defendant guilty. Officer Garrett's head falls into his hands as 20 years of law enforcement career conclude with federal conviction that will follow him permanently. His confident authority has been replaced by the reality of criminal status that eliminates any possibility of future employment in law enforcement. On the charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights against Officer Knox Palmer, we find the defendant guilty. Palmer's complicity through silence has been legally recognized as active participation in systematic constitutional violations rather than passive observation of partner misconduct. His career ends with the same finality, though his cooperation during testimony may influence sentencing considerations. Judge Harrison isn't finished delivering consequences that extend beyond individual accountability. Officer Garrett, you are hereby sentenced to 2 years in federal prison with immediate termination from law enforcement and permanent prohibition from serving in any law enforcement capacity. You will also pay restitution to Dr. Wade for damages resulting from your constitutional violations. Garrett looks up with tears streaming down his face as the full implications penetrate his consciousness. Federal prison, permanent career destruction, financial liability, and public recognition as a convicted civil rights violator who targeted innocent citizens based on racial prejudice. Officer Palmer, recognizing your cooperation during testimony and demonstrated remorse for your complicity, you are sentenced to 1 year of community service, immediate termination from law enforcement, and 5 years federal probation during which any law enforcement contact will result in immediate incarceration. Judge Harrison turns his attention to Dr. Wade, who has maintained professional composure throughout proceedings designed to establish her as a sophisticated criminal. Dr. Wade, this court formally apologizes for the treatment you received from officers sworn to protect and serve all citizens equally. Your dignity throughout this ordeal reflects the highest standards of public service and constitutional commitment. As the gavel falls with finality, Dr. Wade allows herself a brief smile of satisfaction. Justice delayed by weeks of legal proceedings has finally been delivered, according to constitutional principles she has dedicated her career to protecting. The aftermath unfolds with swift precision that demonstrates federal efficiency when constitutional violations require systematic correction. Within 6 months, the transformation becomes visible throughout the jurisdiction where Officer Garrett believed his authority was unquestionable. The local police department operates under federal oversight for 2 years, as FBI investigation reveals cultural corruption extending far beyond individual misconduct. 8 additional officers faced termination for documented constitutional violations that administrative review had systematically buried. Officer Garrett trades his police uniform for mall security polyester that lacks both authority and respect. The plastic badge carries no weight with teenagers who ignore his presence and shoppers who don't acknowledge his existence. The man who once arrested federal officials for impersonating authority now requests that people avoid loitering near food court tables. Officer Palmer wears orange safety vests during community service hours picking up highway litter. 8 hours daily for 52 weeks. Every government vehicle that passes reminds him of Dr. Wade and the phone call that could have prevented his career destruction. The 3 minutes required for federal verification could have saved years of consequences. But individual accountability represents only the beginning of systematic reform initiated by federal intervention. Dr. Sterling Wade returns to her office at the Department of Homeland Security with enhanced authority to implement constitutional compliance measures that extend far beyond local jurisdiction. She addresses the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs with the same calm voice that remained steady during Officer Garrett's courtroom mockery. Now her professional authority carries across C-SPAN cameras to millions of Americans who witness federal commitment to constitutional enforcement. Senators, the case in question represents systematic failure of accountability extending far beyond two officers in one jurisdiction, when federal personnel can be arrested for presenting legitimate credentials, when verification protocols are ignored based on racial assumptions, when complaints are buried without investigation. We face a constitutional crisis requiring immediate federal intervention. The senators listen with rapt attention as she presents comprehensive recommendations developed through 20 years of federal law enforcement experience. Mandatory body cameras for all traffic stops, independent verification procedures for federal credentials, civilian oversight of complaint investigations, zero-tolerance policies for officers with documented patterns of constitutional violations. The Wade Protocol, as legislative implementation becomes known, reaches police departments nationwide within 8 months of her testimony. Training academies now utilize dashboard camera footage from her arrest as definitive example of unconstitutional law enforcement conduct that violates both professional standards and federal civil rights protections. Mia Wade graduates from Northwestern Law School that spring, finishing second in her class despite the distraction of her mother's high-profile case. During her graduation speech as student body president, she addresses the assembled graduates with inherited wisdom about dignity under pressure. My mother taught me that dignity isn't determined by how others treat you. It's defined by how you treat yourself and others, especially when no one is monitoring your behavior. She watched her mother in the graduation audience, maintaining the same composed expression that characterized her courtroom testimony, though her eyes shine with maternal pride that no federal security clearance could conceal. The local courthouse where Officer Garrett once commanded authority undergoes systematic reform under federal oversight. The new police chief, a black woman with doctorate in criminal justice, implements community policing programs that actually serve neighborhoods officers previously terrorized rather than protected. But the most significant transformation occurs in courtrooms across America, where defense attorneys can no longer assume that badges automatically override citizen testimony, where prosecutors understand that constitutional violations will face federal prosecution regardless of defendant uniforms, where judges recognize that justice delayed through administrative protection represents justice denied to citizens whose rights matter equally under constitutional law. Dr. Wade returns to her federal responsibilities carrying additional proof that constitutional systems function when citizens refuse to accept systematic abuse silently, when evidence speaks louder than prejudicial assumptions, when dignity defeats discrimination through legal processes designed to protect all Americans equally. Her secure phone displays an encrypted message that transforms satisfaction into renewed concern. Pattern analysis complete. Similar incidents documented in 17 additional jurisdictions. Federal personnel targeted. Administrative dismissal consistent. Request expanded investigation authority. She responds while reviewing classified reports that suggest systematic targeting extending far beyond individual prejudice. Authorization approved for comprehensive pattern investigation. Coordinate with Civil Rights Division for multi-jurisdictional approach. The victory in her individual case represents merely one battle in broader constitutional warfare requiring sustained federal attention. Dr. Wade has successfully demonstrated that individual accountability is possible when evidence documentation meets federal authority, but systematic reform requires ongoing vigilance against patterns of abuse that operate through administrative protection rather than constitutional compliance. Her laptop screen displays email marked with highest security classifications, federal personnel targeting analysis, preliminary findings, 17 cases involving legitimate federal employees subjected to arrest, detention, or harassment by local law enforcement officers who dismissed credentials without verification procedures. Each incident follows similar patterns: pre-contact prejudicial assumptions, refusal to utilize verification procedures, escalation based on perceived challenge to authority, administrative protection through complaint dismissal. The mathematical consistency suggests coordination rather than coincidental misconduct occurring independently across multiple jurisdictions. Dr. Wade opens another classified file containing personnel photographs of targeted federal employees, 12 African American women, 3 Hispanic men, 2 Asian American agents, all possess legitimate federal authority, all subjected to constitutional violations by local officers who assumed their credentials were fraudulent based on racial characteristics rather than verification procedures. Her phone rings with encrypted call from Deputy Director Carson Blake. Sterling. Pattern analysis confirms systematic targeting. This extends beyond individual prejudice into potential conspiracy affecting federal operations nationwide. Understood. Recommend escalating to Attorney General level for comprehensive investigation. These aren't random incidents. Someone is coordinating resistance to federal authority through local law enforcement channels. The implications transcend individual justice to encompass national security concerns about systematic undermining of federal law enforcement effectiveness. Dr. Wade's case provided documentation necessary to expose broader conspiracy that requires resources exceeding local courthouse jurisdiction. She studies surveillance photographs from 17 jurisdictions, showing similar encounters between federal personnel and local officers who refuse verification procedures. The consistency suggests training or coordination that transforms individual prejudice into systematic resistance against federal constitutional authority. Her secure email chimes with message from Attorney General's office. Investigation authorization approved. Multi-jurisdictional task force activated. Lead authority assigned to Dr. Wade with expanded operational parameters. The personal victory achieved through patient dignity and systematic evidence presentation becomes foundation for broader constitutional protection affecting federal employees nationwide. Officer Garrett's conviction demonstrates that accountability is possible when documentation meets federal authority willing to prosecute constitutional violations regardless of defendant uniforms. But as Dr. Wade prepares for expanded investigation spanning multiple states and potentially dozens of law enforcement agencies, her phone displays final encrypted message that suggests this victory represents merely the beginning of larger constitutional warfare. Subject: Pattern escalation alert. Classification: Top secret/SCI federal personnel targeting incidents increased 43% following your case publicity. Resistance organizing. Request immediate operational security review. The courthouse victory that began with racial humiliation and evolved into federal accountability has triggered broader resistance requiring sustained investigation to protect constitutional rights of federal employees and citizens they serve. Dr. Sterling Wade closes her laptop and prepares for the next phase of constitutional protection, understanding that individual justice represents only the first step toward systematic reform. The dignity she maintained during Officer Garrett's mockery has become foundation for federal investigation that will determine whether constitutional law applies equally to all Americans or remains subject to local prejudice protected through administrative silence. Tomorrow brings new challenges requiring the same patient professionalism that transformed courthouse humiliation into federal victory. But tonight she allows herself brief satisfaction knowing that 2 corrupt officers will never again abuse their authority to violate citizens' constitutional rights. The lock clicks twice. Then preparation begins for broader constitutional warfare requiring sustained federal attention to ensure equal protection under law becomes reality rather than merely theoretical promise. Sometimes the most powerful response to systematic abuse is dignity that refuses to surrender, combined with evidence that speaks louder than prejudicial assumptions. Dr. Wade has proven that truth ultimately surfaces when documentation meets federal authority willing to enforce constitutional protections regardless of local resistance. But the encrypted messages on her secure phone confirm that this victory represents merely opening battle in broader war for constitutional compliance extending far beyond individual accountability to encompass systematic reform of law enforcement culture nationwide. The story continues beyond courthouse walls into federal investigation chambers where constitutional violations face consequences that transcend local political protection, where badge authority submits to federal oversight designed to ensure equal protection for all American citizens regardless of appearance or assumptions about who deserves constitutional rights. Dr. Sterling Wade has transformed personal humiliation into federal precedent, proving that dignity combined with documentation can overcome systematic prejudice when justice systems function according to constitutional principles rather than administrative convenience.